We begin in a kingdom under siege by a powerful goblin army who seemed to be winning the battle. Just when defeat seemed certain, a magical savior appeared. The goblin quickly shifted their attention to the new arrival, but our hero, Juho, fearlessly charged into the fray with his sword and his trusty hound. Little did we know this was all part of a virtual reality video game. Thanks to machines called VRS, players can be transported to a simulated world. There are 4 generations of these devices, the first with martial arts games, the second with shooting games, the third with space games, and the fourth, the most current, a role-playing game called Lost Sky. On the day of its launch, the cyber cafe where our protagonist works were packed with eager players. The cafe's owner had invested heavily to be the first to have a VRS of 4th generation. Later, Juho's friend Kang arrives, who also works at the cafe, and takes advantage of the fact that it's not his turn to try the new machine. Juho doesn't find it funny, so let's go back 5 years to find out why. We see that the protagonist fainted while playing one of the VRS games, which caused him to be in a coma for a whole month. That's why he's so hesitant to use these machines now. The investigator had a hunch and asked the young man to do some tests. At the request of his friends, he accepted, and that's how he found himself back in the world of shooting games. During the game, the protagonist felt everything around him in slow motion, allowing him to take on all enemies alone. But his excitement was cut short when he started to bug and then fainted. When he awoke, the doctor informed him that only 30 minutes have passed and that his RTP, reaction time performance, was incredibly high, far beyond the normal range of 200 to 300 for normal people, and 300 to 400 for pro gamers. His RTP was over 600. With the current technology, he could play normally, but the 2nd generation machine he was using couldn't handle the sheer amount of information. The next day, Juho meets Jeonji, the daughter of his boss, who was taking care of the cyber cafe her father had spent all day in. Kang, who was also there, advised the protagonist to try the Lost Sky, a whole new world, and gave him some tips. He also mentioned that if someone with a high RTP played it, they would be a monster. With some fear, the young man tried the game, with the help of a bracelet that limited his RTP, allowing him to enter without any problem. Once inside, Juho begins to configure his character in a simple way, using his own name. As he enters the game, he realizes it is set in a medieval era and his first mission is to hunt foxes. When he meets one, he sees he's not alone, as a group of adventurers were also doing the same. One of them, surprised to see him alone, and instead of inviting him to his group, they just withdraw. This motivates Juho to find companions, and soon enough, a lot of applications appears to him. Already in a group, begins his mission. Here, a beautiful blue-haired player, Chaming Nim, explains that the mission was completed long ago, and now they would have to hunt some wolves. But they take too much life with their attacks. This is why they first try to raise levels and get items hunting foxes, which is the easiest. The conversation is interrupted when a fox is heading towards them, but the girl is not able to attack it. Juho goes after it, realizing that he can predict the movements of the animal, so he throws his sword and hits the target. This left his companions in awe, especially Chaming, who thanks him for his assistance. Otherwise, the group would have been frustrated with his carelessness. He humbly replied that it was just luck. The group then continued with the hunt, and every time a fox escaped, the protagonist used his ability to catch it, something that was becoming easier and easier, and it drew the attention of the other players who praised him for his skills that was improving more and more. They even started calling him the Fox Master. After a while, the hunt ended and the whole group settled by. Chaming then took the opportunity to talk with our protagonist alone. With a bit of shyness, she asked if she could add him to her list of friends, to which he gladly accepted. The next day, when Juho reconnected, he received a video call from Chaming, who invited him to play with her for a while. He confessed that he enjoyed playing with her company, leaving our protagonist blushing. Later, while they were hunting wolves, Juho asked Chaming if she wouldn't mind playing with him, since he was of a lower level. She cheerfully replied that she didn't care as long as they both had fun. Juho decided to make an effort to ensure they had a blast. Also noticed that Chaming now used a bow as her main weapon, as it fit her style better. So they sought out a group to do the wolf mission, and, as expected, they got a lot of requests. They chose a group formed by 2 warriors with shields and warriors with a main weapon. They put together a strategy that consisted of cornering the wolf with their shields while the protagonist, Chaming, and a player called Pretty Girl attack it. The mission began, noting the difficulty involved. Seeing Chaming, the young man thought she wouldn't do much damage to the wolf, but he was pleasantly surprised to see her be the first to attack and finish the beast. Not wanting to be left out, Juho also launched into the attack as soon as another wolf appeared, leaving everyone amazed. After finishing the wolf hunt, the young man couldn't help but be flattered by his teammates, especially Chaming, who thought it was a good choice to hunt with him. The other members of the team took the opportunity to ask him to be their friend, and as always, he accepted delightedly. Later, he leveled up along with the statistics of his armor and got a new sword. Thanks to it, he could continue with his next mission, to hunt wild boars. During the way, Juho offered all his potions to the squire, as he was usually the one who received more damage. In the area of wild boars, the protagonist analyzed the movements of the enemy, realizing that the animal froze for a few seconds when it charged his attack, so he put together a strategy with the whole group to take advantage of this mechanic. The next day, a sleepy Juho trudged to work, where Jeonji greeted him with a look that said he'd been out drinking and watching some kind of video, you know what I mean. Regardless, she didn't give it much thought and left the place. At the moment, Juho noticed that the cyber cafe was empty due to the game being in maintenance. Later, an angry girl appeared. It was Kang's girlfriend, Jae-jung, who had been looking for him to give him a good scolding for playing all day. Once things had calmed down, the girl noticed how tired Juho looked and offered to introduce him to a friend, but he explained that he was just exhausted from playing all night. Hearing this, his friend asked why the game was in maintenance. Juho guessed it was for an update, but Kang explained that it was something else. Some players had discovered a bug to hunt wild boars, and it had quickly been used by almost everyone. Well, we all know who was to blame. In any case, he said they soon fix the error. The team take their positions to face off against the formidable Trine, a girl with tentacles that back a powerful punch. The boy with the shield skillfully deflects her blows, while Juho violently attempts to attack with his sword, only to receive a few scratches. In the midst of the battle, Trine starts to regenerate and change her attack pattern to target multiple opponents. The main character takes advantage of their momentary stillness to break through her shields and attack. With remarkable agility, he touches the tentacle and reaches the enemy. Just as he manages to pierce her with his sword, she wakes up and shifts into a new phase, trapping the pretty girl with one of her tentacles and now do more damage than before. Fortunately, Chaming manages to save her. Juho deduces that the boss is on his last leg, since one of her patterns is to increase the strength of her attacks every time she receives critical damage. Determined, the young man passes through Trine's shield again, and with a clever trick, delivers the final blow. Kang was fuming. His team had been defeated yet again by the boss of the Orc Village, a foe too powerful for even the most experienced players. He described the boss as a formidable opponent, with life points that were hard to deplete and a close-range attack that left them stunned. Goyo asked how they could defeat him, and Kang suggested a spellbook. But these were hard to come by, as orc mages were in high demand and players were killing each other to get them. The two friends entered the game and were delighted to find that the bug concerning the orc mages and their spellbooks had been patched. Kang had also improved his stats and was now wearing a new armor, a reward from their last battle. As they talked quietly in the Orc Valley, they spotted a wizard and ran towards him before anyone else could. Goyo threw his sword at the wizard and quickly eliminated him, and the team celebrated their precious loot. After a brief discussion, they decided that Shamin should carry the spell book, as it was better suited to her style of combat. Shamin tested her new weapon and was able to shoot magic arrows that she could modify to her liking, although she still needed a bit more practice. The mission continued, and the team encountered yet another magician, but they weren't the only ones. A desperate team was also after the books and threatened to take out the loot. Our protagonist wouldn't allow it, and the evildoers were ready to attack. Juho showed them his two swords and they backed down, trying to attack Juho instead. He killed them both without any trouble. The rest of the thieves were attacking the team, but Shamin put his new skills to test as they were defeated. Our heroes realized how different it was to fight against players, and were relieved that they weren't punished since their fight was in self-defense. Otherwise, their names would have been red, which symbolizes something bad. Amid their excitement, they remembered the Orc Wizard was still around, so they went after him. Meanwhile, Juho was on his way to work when he got the news that they had cleared the Orc Village. It was none other than his friend Kang, who had been asleep in the internet cafe. The village was now a town for players, and Juho asked his friend what the loot from the Orc boss was. Kang was too hungry to answer, but with a full stomach he revealed that he got the boss Guja plus 100 upgrade stones, making the first ones to be dropped worth a lot. Out of 40 players, only 3 could do it. It's just another day in the game, and Shieldboy is wondering who took out the Orc boss on server number 1, Unfortunately, the server village, where our heroes were located, hasn't been liberated yet, but one squad is ready to take on the challenge, if they can agree on how to split the reward. As the team is eating in the game, one of them receives an invitation to join an Orc raid, an honor usually reserved for the best teams on the server. Shieldboy explains that most of the players split because they couldn't reach an agreement, and now there are vacancies. The protagonist hesitates, knowing the difficulty of the mission, but submits it to a vote. On the battlefield, the Orc boss is sweeping away everyone and even rushes against our heroes who just arrived. Juho attacks him, but barely makes a dent. Seconds later, the boss changes faces and throws an intense look at our protagonist, roaring loudly and paralyzing all players around him. Just when the boss is about to destroy them, a cute girl appears and avoids the attack. Suddenly, the protagonist manages to free himself from paralysis for a few seconds and realizes that this happens every time pain is inflicted. Though the battle was lost, our hero learned a new trick that promises to be useful in his next confrontation. The next day, Juho meets Kang, who cheerfully inquires about his raid. Juho's friends suggest he joins a more advanced server, but Juho is content with his current team. With confidence, Juho tells his team they can take on the Orc boss alone. He reveals a trick he discovered on the battlefield and they all take their positions. Juho is the only one who stays below to fight the Orc boss, while the others attacks from above. The Orc fails to detect the presence of the boys on the rock, giving them a great advantage. Juho easily dodges the attacks until his RTP limiter begins to fail. He remembers what the researcher told him about using it for too long or concentrating too much. The Orc boss changes faces and Juho has no choice but to use the pain trick to move and attack. He also tells his team to do as much damage as possible. The battle continues with the heroes taking the advantage. Though Juho has run out of potions, he bravely fights melee and the Orcs prepares to launch another roar. Juho was ready to strike the bug from behind, but he was prevented from doing so, risking a critical hit. So they continued with a great exchange of blows for a time until the bug dropped his weapons and fell to the ground. Juho took advantage of the moment and gave the final blow, defeating the monster once and for all. Elsewhere, we saw different teams performing the same mission. On one hand, the team called White Bone, which we saw at the beginning of the story, and on the other hand, the combat team had almost nothing to beat. But in the middle of the battle, the Orc boss disappeared, surprising everyone. One of the players deducted that someone else had carried out the mission before them. Returning with our heroes, we saw an exhausted Juho celebrating the victory with his companions, who couldn't quite believe they had won with only 4 people. The shield boy told them that he was recording the whole encounter and also hurried them to collect the great loot. Among the objects was the famous weapon of the Orc, along with some magic books and valuable stones for improvement. Juho said that this was not the only great prize, because 3 days ago, Kang told the young men that when they defeated the Orc, his village would become a place for players. All those who wanted to enter would have to pay an amount, and in addition to the profits obtained, 10% would go to the group. Taking calculations, the shield boy deducted that they would win up to 2.5 million coins each, and if they exchanged them from real money, they would have about $25,000, which left the whole team shocked. The next day, our protagonist was very worried until he received a notification from the game that announced temporary maintenance, something that intrigued the users. We also realized how they changed the rock where our heroes found the trick, reducing the duration of the ogre's roar. Among other things, it turns out that due to the trick that was applied, the team did not know if they would validate their victory or worse, be sanctioned from the game. At that moment, Kang appeared angry with the changes, since they nerfed the ogre after so much effort it took them to defeat it in the game. We saw how the village was converted into a refuge for humans while exploring the place. Juho received a message sent by the administrations with much fear. The hero opened it, thinking that they discovered the trick they applied, although it turned out to be something else. The administrators recognized as legitimate the raid that our heroes won, and calmer, the team met to share the loot. Chaming took the magic books, since she was the only one who knew how to use them, while the cute girl took the Orc's weapon and spent almost all of her upgrade stones to level it up. Days later, the team arrived in Lycanthrope, a desolate place with nothing but stones. Their mission was to reclaim the Forgotten Fortress, and to do so, they had to battle the Lycanthropes. But first, they had to find a hidden castle. As they searched, they stumbled upon a cave of wolves, where they encountered one with a humanoid appearance. Suddenly, a powerful force attacked the boy with the shield, but luckily, Juho came to his aid. Juho noticed that the wolf had an impressive ability to dodge attacks, and Chaming tried to attack, but his attacks were not very strong due to the enemy's intimidating look. Juho and Cute Girl then use a technique to trap the wolves, giving a Cute Girl a chance to attack with her higher level weapon, which easily killed the beast. The raid continued with our heroes finishing off the wolves, especially Cute Girl, who kept showing off the power of her weapon, making Juho want to improve his. He then found himself in a crystal, which was a mana stone of the wolf. By gathering many, a blacksmith could turn them into any type of weapons, which piqued everyone's interests. Meanwhile, Kang and his boss were eating, and the young men explained their relationship. Kang was a pro gamer who spent his time playing instead of taking care of the internet cafe, but his boss treated him well, something Juho was a bit envious of. Juho retaliated by taking his friend's food. Kang then told Juho about the Western Wolf Cave, and said that to enter he needed a good armor and a level 4 weapon. On the 5th floor, they would find a scary wolf called Twin Heads. The manhwa is still on the air, and I'll be bringing you the next chapters of the Wolf arc as soon as they come out. Remember to give us a thumbs up and to see you next time.